What's going on, everybody? Welcome back again to The Haunted Beard. My name is Jake. Well, today I've got another movie review here for you, and this one was recommended by a viewer, Ivan. Shout out to Ivan. Recommended I watch the movie Terrified, or Aterrados, as it's known in Spanish. It is an Argentinian horror film from 2017, and I just gave it a watch and want to give you my thoughts, so let's get into this thing. When strange events occur in a neighborhood in Buenos Aires, a doctor specializing in the paranormal, her colleague, and an ex-police officer decide to investigate further. I'll just say right off the bat that I had a pretty good time with this thing and would recommend it. I think it's probably a bit of a hidden gem. It's not a masterpiece by any means, but I think it is worth a watch and I would recommend it. And I was hooked 7 minutes into this thing. So the movie starts off and we're introduced to this husband and wife, and right from the get-go, things kind of start going bump in the night at their house, and there is some more or less paranormal type activity that starts occurring in this neighborhood. And as I said, 7 minutes in, this thing grabbed me and I was in. As we get just an intense scene where a husband walks into a bathroom, and if I could kind of give you this a little bit of a play-by-play. There's kind of some weird stuff, like I said, that starts happening, and little sounds and things like that. And he walks into the bathroom, and we see blood on the wall, and immediately we're like, "Uh-oh, that's not good," right? And all this happens in about 3 seconds. The camera pans over, and you see the wife hanging up in the corner in the shower. And immediately you kind of think, oh, she must have hung herself. And then she moves and is like basically pushed across to the other side and hits the other side of the shower wall. And then she just starts getting like, there's some sort of entity that's moving her back and forth and just smashing her head back and forth on the walls in the shower. And it's bloody and intense and disturbing and gruesome, and just a really solid and effective way to start this movie off. So what ends up happening is the husband gets put in jail because he is the obvious culprit for what happened to his wife. And then he's visited by 3 people, and they are these paranormal investigators who want to simply investigate the claims and what type of activity is happening in this neighborhood, because he is not the only person to make these sort of supernatural claims that something crazy is going on here. And so from that point, and for about the next 30 to 40 minutes of screen time, we actually kind of do a bit of a flashback that kind of fills in some of the backstory on some of the other events that have been going on in this neighborhood. Now, I think the most obvious and really important question we have to ask when watching a horror movie to know whether or not it's good or whether or not we should watch it is it scary? And is Terrified scary? Yeah, I think that it is. And so for that reason alone, like I said, I would recommend it. I will say, though, it did fall short of being what I would consider like a great film, and it did leave a little bit to be desired in terms of the overall story. There's not a whole lot of depth to the story. It's pretty kind of surface level, and it did leave a little bit to be desired, in my opinion. And I just wish that it would have given us a little bit more depth and information into kind of what exactly is happening. Some of the questions that I would say are kind of the obvious questions are, what is this thing? Why is it there? Why is it doing this? What does it want? Or it just kind of what is going on. And for the most part, we don't really get much of an explanation. It doesn't really give us any sort of answers or explanation. And so I just felt that there was a little bit to be desired there in terms of the story. But in terms of the actual scares and the suspense and the horror, I think it is pretty good and pretty effective. And so overall, still had a pretty good time with this thing. There's just a handful of scenes that I really quite enjoyed and think the setup and the execution to scare us as the audience works quite well. I think it gives us kind of a handful of kind of different flavors of horror, if you will, kind of different styles and different setups. As I mentioned a minute ago, there's the kind of that opening scene in the shower with the husband and wife, and that's kind of one of those scenes that's really going to kind of grab you and disturb you. There's other setups where things are just kind of creepy and just some good suspense building. They do a lot of good stuff with just sound and shadows and lights and some kind of classic setups there, but there's just some good kind of suspense and kind of creepy, eerie, where you're kind of waiting for something to kind of jump out at you. And then too, we get just some good scenes that are, I would just say, just kind of good classic horror fun that kind of put a smile on your face and made me even laugh a little bit as I was just kind of having fun with it. And so you just get a good sort of variety of horror flavors throughout Terrified that I quite enjoyed. Another scene that really stood out to me and was one of the highlights in the movie was one of the kids in the neighborhood gets hit and killed by a bus. And what ends up happening is the police go over to the mother's house to kind of, investigate and just talk to her. And then one of the characters who's the paranormal investigator shows up because the police calls him because something weird is happening. And there's this scene where those two characters walk into, I think it's the kitchen in the house, and all we see, I just really like the blocking and kind of the setup here is where the camera's positioned behind them, and they're occupying kind of the middle of the screen, and we can tell that they're looking at something, but we don't know what they're looking at. And then they kind of separate, and you see down at the end of this table is the dead kid, his corpse, sitting in the chair at the end of the kitchen table. And it's just this great little reveal just by simply positioning the actors like that and then just having them move, and then now you see what they're seeing. I just thought it was just a nice little setup and execution that really is just like, holy smokes. And then that whole scene too is just really, really good because they kind of build some nice suspense and tension there, because they're talking about that the policeman is saying that he thinks that the kid had moved. And so there's just this scene goes on for a handful of minutes, and you're just kind of waiting to see if this kid moves. And so it just got some nice tension throughout that scene as well that I really liked. About halfway through the movie, we come back to sort of the present day with the investigators there in the jail cell with the husband from the beginning of the movie. And he agrees to allow them to kind of go investigate his house. And so the second half of the movie is really just sort of their kind of primary investigation and going in to see what they can uncover. And throughout the second half of the movie, we just get a handful of just pretty solid scenes and setups here. I really like just the creature itself. I don't think that they overshow it, and I think that it's used effectively. It's creepy looking. I like the use of sound here as well, including the musical score. Maybe used a bit much. I sometimes like a little bit more restraint, just personally, but I think it works pretty well. There's a particular sequence where the detective, he has like a hearing aid, and he turns it down, and just sort of the kind of the audio effect that they do during the scene is pretty cool, as he's kind of looking at this cabinet, and you hear just this eerie, strange sound. And so there's just kind of some cool sort of audio effects that they do. There's another great little scene too where the detective, it basically just gets to the point where he's like freaked out. He's like, I'm out. I can't handle this anymore. He ends up getting in his car, and he's sitting there in his car, and we see through the side window that there's something kind of off in the background. It's out of focus, but it's running towards him. And it's this creature, and its head's all like jacked up, and it's like hanging downwards. And he sees it and just bolts. He's out of there, and I couldn't help but just laugh. And it's just one of them fun scenes that is just entertaining and just good horror fun. And it's just another highlight for me in this movie. Like I said, overall, I had a pretty good time with this, and I would recommend it if you haven't seen it. It did leave a little bit to be desired in terms of the story. I just wish that there was a little bit more there. And in terms of the ending as well, too, I just feel like it didn't really kind of resolve or wrap up a whole lot. It's a bit of an open-ended type of movie. But in terms of the actual scares and the suspense and the creature, I think all of it is pretty effective and works quite well. And this movie's only like 80 or 85 minutes long or something like that, so it moves by at a pretty, quick pace and everything. So I think for an overall grade, I'm probably going to go, let's see, probably 6.5, maybe 7 out of 10, somewhere right in there. So those are my thoughts on Terrified. Let me know down below if you have seen this thing and what your thoughts are. Would love to hear from you. Thank you so much for watching. If you like videos like this, that is what I do on The Haunted Beard. It is all horror and thriller movie content coming at you. So hit that subscribe button. I'd greatly appreciate it. That's all I got for you. I'll see you next time on The Haunted Beard.